Hello everyone, welcome back to a new interactive tutorial. In this video I'm going to review this low poly pillar design. This is an incredible design. It has a lot of detail. It will show you how to draw spirals and how to make a lot of other details. It's hard to see in this image, you'll see it live, we'll start creating. And it's doing this all using low poly modeling techniques. It is using some new features that we have not used in the previous few tutorials I reviewed, but more importantly, it's actually using some clever design techniques. And at the end, it's also adding textures, and that's it basically. I've also rendered this using the rendering, so as a bonus, I may show how to do the rendering as well at the end. So without further ado, let's get started. So it starts with a reference image. I think we have not shown this before. That's an image that we're going to use as a reference, basically as the name suggests, that we're going to follow. We click on the reference image, and normally when you click on this, the same thing when we use in tutorials, file upload. In reality, when you design on your own, making something, it will give you to browse from your computer to load something, but because this is within a tutorial, it gives you instead a place to reference image, kind of emulate what you will have from your browser. And you click on this, and it loads this image. So at this point, this is a simple PNG, a simple image, and we're going to change the opacity to 80 so we can see through. It doesn't interfere too much with our drawing. I actually found this throughout the tutorial. For me personally, it still bothers me a little bit. I would have hidden this. You can hide this, so sometimes I would have hidden this, but yeah, the tutorial leaves it as it is. But nevertheless, here what we're going to do next thing here is we're going to select this and move it to a different location. So you can move it. It's actually hard to see the dot. If you don't see this, you have to zoom in. There was a dot over here where to move it. You would click next. If I follow a tutorial like this, it's not really too much educational where to position this, so you can just click next if you don't see it. But nevertheless, I was able to see it now, a tiny dot where to position it. So now we have this image, and we're going to use this as a reference. So we're going to go to the 3D sketch, and we're going to draw, first choose the front back plane, because we're going to draw on this section. But the front back plane by default is setting in the center. As you can see over here, if I rotate, it's set in the center. So we're going to offset the plane. Let's see, it tells me to remove the top and bottom. Yes, so I have only front and back. So now I don't have actually the bottom. It removed it. You don't have to do that. I'm not sure why the designer did it, but sometimes it could interfere if you're trying where it wants to snap. But this is not drawing close to the floor, so it wouldn't really make a big difference. But nevertheless, this is now setting this to offset to minus 338. And now I guess it's aligned with this. And these offsets are usually, I'm not sure how the tutorial was recorded. Maybe you use this, just not showing, I'm not sure. But normally if I would do like this, you could just snap it to it or just go all the way, whatever way it's doing. But the main thing is we want to draw something that we can see over here what's happening. And now we're going to start with the actual drawing. So we click over here to draw, and we're going to start following this line. You can see over here, we're drawing here, and then we're entering a value, so it should be 0, and position over here, and then we are entering 0, and basically we start drawing this. Now I've shown before tracing videos, so I'm gonna go now, just skip this. This is basically drawing the basic line over here, and it's, let's say, snapping over here, and now it tells me to go on arc, so it draws. I can actually skip this through quickly because we have done this before. So it's basically just creating arcs here, and now it tells me go back to a line and start drawing here. So, and back to an arc now. So it's using basically the same. You see, we worked the entire thing with one profile, so there's no like guides. Everything we do over here is in this, and it just creates here, drawing out these sections. Okay, so now we finish. It's not too much. We created this basic shape over here, which you can see it's kind of like rectangular shape plus these arc shapes. And now we're going to revolve it. So when you do revolve, I've explained this in previous videos and tutorials, that we create only a half a shape in cases if you want them to be closed. But it also revolves. You could revolve as a solid, or which in this case will create a hole over here, or you can revolve it around an edge. So we're going to revolve around an edge, and we're going to select this edge. In reality, actually, this edge is not supposed to be drawn. You don't have to draw it. It's basically just for a guide, but that's basically what we do over here. And as you can see, we have the basic shape drawn over here. So this is just created kind of a cylinder, but added these things. Now, you could have done this with multiple pieces. I've seen people do that. You create a cylinder and then you create a few other shapes to cut out some, but this is much neater and much cleaner, and definitely much lower poly. We had only 816 faces, and they're all still quads here, so it's a really nice shape. Okay, so now we're simply going to move it in the Z. It sets me to 0, which is basically just centering it, and we exit out. Now we turn on the wireframe mode. As you can see over here, this is a really nice low poly structure, which is why the revolve is much better approach than simply compiling multiple objects and using stitch and scoop to cut out, because this gives you a really clean topology. And now we're going to see how we can take advantage of these things. So we're going to activate polygon mode, and we select this polygon, and if you see the shape over here, this has a top over here that is kind of not rounded. So revolve is limited to things that are kind of rounded. I mean, you can make less edges. If you make 4 edges, then it would be kind of squared, but then the entire shape would be like that. So in this case, we have a unique situation where we have the entire thing rounded with the exception of a top and bottom. So this is why this is going to be done with a different way. So now we can use extrusion. Now, if you normally extrude, you're just extending this face, but there is an option over here to use. First of all, we set the amount. So we want to extrude to 6D, and in this case, he just extends it. But there's an option to use side extrusion, which in this case, this actually is non-manifold at this point. If you rotate, you can see hovering between the yellow, which is the selection color, and this is selected, and the blue, which is the original face. It kind of flickers between them because they occupy the same space, and there's no thickness over here. So this is not really yet manifold. So there's 2 ways to do something like this when you want to extend and make it manifold. One way is simply move it up, which actually this is going to do over here. It moves up the Y to 14, and then it's finalized it. So this by itself, it's already manifold. I can finalize this. We still have not solved the problem of making this, it's still rounded. We have not solved this by making them flat, rectangular. So we're going to solve this in a moment. But I first want to say that at this point, when you do sometimes flat extrusion, if you move it up, they don't touch each other. They're not collapsed on top of each other. It's already manifold. But now the design actually asks to be flat. So it's using the flatten tool. And this is also something very interesting. If you remember my last tutorial, we have used selecting some vertices and use the scale them to 0, which is kind of flatten it. That worked very good to flatten something, but the downside is that you have to select the vertices and work exactly what you need to flatten and then set them to 0. The flatten tool, on the other hand, is not limited to that. You don't have to make any selection, just select the entire thing at once, but no picking which has to be set. And I'm simply setting over here the X to 150, which, as you can see, flatten the entire thing like this. And then we do the same thing over here, the Z to 150. So this is a much faster approach than using scale as we did in the previous tutorial. Okay, so now we have this basic shape already that is rectangular, but the design asks to have this extended as well. So we're simply going to extrude that by 10, and we're not moving anything and deselecting. So this is how we got this shape. And as you can see over here, the benefit of doing this, you could have done this compiling other shapes, but what this tutorial is teaching mostly is to show how you make something really low poly. And if you ever going to need to do professional 3D modeling, in most cases this is what they're going to need. So you see this beautiful quads everything. This provides a lot of flexibility and has this triangular fan on the top of a rectangle. This is a really beautiful tutorial and beautiful face structure. So now we're going to do the same thing at the bottom. We didn't do this in one shot. You can technically do them together, but because it's going to be a little bit different style. The bottom is not going to have this angle over here. So we're going to do about the same approach, same concept, which is going to set this to 6D and side extrusion. But now instead of moving it, we're just going to go, let's see what we do over here. Adding an option. Oh, actually, we are setting it. I didn't remember that. It's just setting it to -1, just a different value, but it's still moving it down. I'm not actually sure why, but and it finalizes it. Okay, you didn't need actually to do that, but yeah, that's what this is doing. And you flatten it to X to 170, and same thing over here, 170. So we have different values over here, but again, the same technique. We're going to move this now to also a different value now, to 1.4, and And so we have the basic pillar structure. Now we deselect this. The basic pillar structure is done with a beautiful triangulation quad structure and only 880 polygons, the entire thing. If you would do any other technique different than this, if you would build this from pieces or even the entire thing using extrusion, anything else, it would be much more difficult or much more many more polygons. Okay, so now we're going to start adding the exciting stuff. We're going to start doing the more details. So what we want to accomplish now here is we want to add this curves, this cut in between the entire thing. And over here again, we can add a lot of tiny cylinders and move them around and pivot them around and then cut them out. But this is going to make it out of one piece, kind of like a sculpted piece, everything out of one piece. So, which again is for the purpose of keeping them low poly and keeping them nice face structure. So when you do over here, we need to select something, and we're gonna, instead of picking individual faces, we're gonna use same concept we have in polygon selection or in face selection, these advanced settings. The edit details by itself has also a similar setting, which is automatic loop finding. And once we do this, we're going to rendering like this so we can see what's happening, I guess. So it goes to this mode. And now you can see we select this vertex, this edge over here and move it down. And it automatically selects the entire loop because we use loop selection. This is actually different than advanced loop selection and face setting, where you need to click on one edge and then its neighboring edge to loop select. This allows you to select just one edge and drag it, and automatically finds the entire loop, which is a lot better obviously in this case. The same thing over here, and move this up and move it over here. So we got this thing. Now it sets back to normal mode. And as you can see, what happened here is we added this loop over here, and then we added this loop over here. Now this is typical concept for advanced box modeling techniques where you add loops and you work with loops. And this is a great tool to do this. And now we're going to do a mirror, which can be even more advanced. A mirror plus advanced automatic ring finding. So the same concept we have in edge selection, there is rings and loops. Here we do rings. But look what's going to happen over here. This finds it. I need to click just on this one and move it here. And it selects automatically rings. The entire shape as added rings. Because look how this, it finds the automatic ring finding, finds automatically rings throughout the entire shape. And this is really incredible how much time this saves. Looks the face structure we created over here. It's really incredible. Now we're going to go to edge mode. And in the advanced setting, we're going to use them, the ring, same thing to select them. So a loop is kind of like that closes a loop. A ring is consecutive. They don't close a loop. It's not connected. They're just in the same ring that make it up. So now we go to ring finding, and you see we select this ring over here and click on the next one. Let's say, oops, let me just select this. I take this, and okay, so we selected over here the entire ring. And look, it selected everything, all of these edges. But we want to select only part of it. So what you can do is a custom pattern. This is unique to SelfCAD. The ring and loop selection are general concepts you find in most 3D modeling applications, but custom pattern is something unique to SelfCAD. So I can make it over here to skip 2. So I wanted to skip 2 rings. So basically what you see over here, it selects one and skips 2, selects the other one, skips 2, and so on. There are other settings over here how to skip, but this is segment based, but this is the best what we need over here, and we close it. So now what you have done here is we selected these, and because we've added the loops before, we did not select the top nor the entire bottom, just kind of the thing over here, this section. And now we're going to use fillet, a technique we've used before in other tutorials, where we use this to kind of simplify or add some settings or cut it out and something like that. Over here we're going to use it to flatten this, and we're going to make this to, let's see, this is going to be the offset, the level, it's going to be to 6. Okay. And now this is basically standing outwards. It's hard to see over here because it's a wireframe mode, but we're going to go now to minus, we're going to set this to -4. -4. So it goes inwards. This goes inwards, and we finalize it. Okay. So now, if you see over here, it's hard to see. We'll see it later. Okay, now you can see it. You can see this is engraved basically. So instead of using small cylinders and do them, then cut them out, we did it this way, which made sure that we maintain the entire structure from the topology and much less added faces and so on. We still just 1,000 faces, a little bit more, 1,300 faces for this entire structure. So now we turn on edge mode and we select this profile. And let's see what we do over here. We're going to hide them away. So we're going to add, so we have done with the basic pillar structure, and now we're going to start adding the spirals and these things. So what we do over here, we go to a spline and we start drawing over here, and this is basically just going to trace this. I'm going to go next, or maybe trace it, it's easy. Just do it like this, and as you can see, it finishes one, and then we want to finish this line. So you see we traced this single one, and now this wants to continue, so press escape to start the next line. And now we do the same thing over here, not line, rather spline, and we trace this and like this, and we press escape, and then finally the last one, something like this. Now you can see this is not really tracing it exactly, so we're going to later define them a little bit, make it fix it up. But also this is a spline. In general, the nature of a spline is that if you move more points, it kind of shapes it out. But yeah, still this could have been done more precise. It could have been set to orthographic mode, you can see better, but the precision over here wasn't really a big deal. It's just using kind of approximation, but at the end it would look nice. So now we're going to do add thickness. So we have here a single line. Now there's a few ways to make this. I think in previous tutorials we have used the follow path approach, where we add another circle and made it sweep along these lines and made them. But now it's going to use a different technique, which is actually really helpful in a lot of general modeling techniques. So we're going to add over here the add thickness, and what happened here is that SelfCAD's tools double down like for each mode. So if you think add thickness in a mesh, you think about hollowing something, but if you think working with a profile or spline or line, whatever, this will basically just add the thickness over here and finalize it. So you can see we have here basically just kind of an inset. It made it an inset, and I think an offset, basically. I think it's called on the software offset. And then we use fillet, which is the idea of smoothing them out. So that we do level 1, and this is just smoothing out the entire thing. As you can see, it gets rounded. The offset gets rounded over here. It smooths out everything, and now we have as if we have drawn something smooth over here. So yeah. And now we're going to go to extrusion to turn this into 3D. So, and then confirm. So basically we have these basic shapes, but this is only on one side. We actually need it on the other side as well. So let's see what it asks me over here to hide them away. And let's see. Okay, it's first going to continue drawing. Later we'll add the other side. We're going to mirror them. Okay, so now we're going to use this other arc, and we're going to start drawing. Let's see where it asks me. Snap the grid. Precision settings, it wants me to snap the grid, so we can start drawing precisely. So we start from this center point, and because we snap the grid, we can draw it with precision. And now we enter a 25 bulge factor and move it to this side. Actually, if you enter 25, you see it moved it to the right. Now actually snapping it to the left side. And now I'm doing the same thing over here, where it's snapping. And what it's doing over here, we're drawing this is actually very interesting how we draw a spline. A spline is half arcs connecting to another half arc, which gets bigger in size, and then other half arc which gets bigger. And we use the grid vertices to allow me to draw them with precision as it gets bigger. So you see the first thing is we snapped a 25, and then we made it snap to this, which is basically another I guess that's 50. And then we're going to do over here, let's see, snap here, and then we're going to enter 75. So if you see the idea, what we do over here is that this was 25. This is an entire thing, because these box sizes, based on the way the workspace setting is set up, the box size is 50. So we started with the 25. Now we snapped to the grid. We had a 50. Now we had to go 75. So we entered the value, and I'm assuming it's going to follow the same pattern now. So let's see, highlight over here, and let's see. Now we can snap over here. So basically, it keeps on following the same pattern. We click, and now we enter 125. So it keeps every second we have to enter, because the grid vertices is not enough to give me to snap. We don't have a detail, so we have to enter, but every second is what we can snap. Okay, so now we can enter it. You can see how easy this was, drawing the basic spline. And now we're going to do the same thing. We need to add some thickness to it. So we're going to go to add thickness in the same approach, and we're going to add it to 20. So we have this nice thing. And now what we're going to do here is we're going to go 3D sketch again, and we're going to finalize this, clean this up. So we're going to click here, and then click here, and here, So this is basically just adding the last one over here to kind of close it over here. And now it's going to add a line. So here is actually, until here we have the design. What it's doing now is not really part of design. It's a small thing, a technical thing, which is related to keeping objects manifold. So if you see what's happening over here, this is something very, very important. You see these come together at a single edge. So we have here two things that actually collapse at a single edge. And later we're going to start extruding this, making them as a separate part, which will end up being a mesh that actually collapses at a single edge, which makes it actually non-manifold in some cases. In the case like this, you see later the design, this actually makes it non-manifold. So our goal here is to make it the same thing we have over here, that it ends at a line. But we're going to make it a tiny line, but we want them to finish at a line, not at a single edge, which will later make some issues. So we're going to draw here a line simple here and over here. Now the reason we click over here, just because we have a vertex over here, it's easy to snap. And we wanted actually only this small tiny segment over here, but we're going to clean this up now. So we added this. Now we're going to go to edge mode to select an edge, and as you can see, we actually remove this edge plus over here these edges over here, and we just click delete, so it's removed. So you can see what happened over here, that we ended up having a line over here closing it, and this is just a technicality to keep it manifold, not part of design, but it wouldn't hurt the design. Okay, so now what we can do over here is it's using geometry clean option to, not this one, okay, duplicates to false. Okay, so it's setting remove loose edges, and this is the idea here, is sometimes when you draw these things, especially when you have tiny things, if you remove something, it may be a very tiny edge that you didn't realize, and then it may make issues later that this has extra loose edges. So we just, for extra precaution, we do this, and it turns out there was no extra loose edges, so, but never hurts to, better be safe than sorry. So this is basically clean. Okay, I've seen many times where people didn't realize and you ended up mistake having something small, so it's always good to double check, remove loose edges. Okay, so now we're going to set this to key proportion, and we're going to set the X to 56. So this basically resizes the entire thing small and make sure it keeps the proportion. And now we're going to move it to X to 59, which is basically moving it aligned with this image over here, and the Y to 226. So it's now aligned with this. Okay. Okay, now that we have the basic design over here ready, we're going to complete them, add a little bit more drawing, and we're going to draw over here. Actually, we're going to set it over here to 0. And we're going to set over here to 0. So now what it's doing over here is it's using, this is actually interesting why you saw before we moved it to the center. When you have something in the center, you can always use the 0 value to snap much easier. So we do over here the same thing again, we type in 0 and then snap over here, which means that we don't need any points to snap to. We just enter level 0, which is in this direction, in the X direction, the 0 of the screen. Okay, now we're going to add here another arc and draw over here and simply move it out, and then the other arc over here, and basically we got the basic shape. Okay, so now what we can do over here, this is different when you think about the revolve. We created only half a shape, but now we're not going to use revolve. We're going to need to have the complete shape, so we're simply copying this onto the left side, and once we do this, we're going to merge it. You can click on Command G, and you see it remove two edges and one spline. And now we're going to go to 3D sketch, and we're going to add the final. We still need to add here a part, which is this bridge part here. So let's see, we press escape, I guess it was a mistake move. Okay, so click over here and then click over here the other side around and add this. Okay, so now we are done. We're going to remove some pieces. So in this case it removes only these, the center lines, when we merge it. In reality we could have removed this. Once you've drawn, it added these vertices. You can see we could have removed this entire thing, this edge over here, the inside edge, and these edges, and same thing over here. We could have removed some others, but yeah, I guess it's not needed, but that's what it is. And I was going to use to set the geometry clean, just to make sure there's nothing left over, and actually it was removed correctly, nothing here was left over, loose edges. So now it's going to go to extrusion, and as you can see over here we have the basic shape done. The problem here is, you can see, if you're going to select this, we turn on polygon selection. If you want to select this entire thing, you select it as once. If you want to go to faces, you start selecting faces, but we need to get here out just the pillar design. Now if you're going to go now to solid mode, you wouldn't even see there's a pillar, the spiral, I'm sorry, the spiral design, because this is just engraved inside. So what we can do over here is we're going to go to advanced settings and we turn on the part selection, and if you do part selection, you can see we can start selecting these parts over here. And here's actually where it makes a difference. If we would have removed these edges over here, we could have selected this entire thing as one piece, but because we left it like this, actually we had to select them in separate pieces, but not a big deal. And now we're going to go and extrude that and enter a value of 4 and finalize it. So, and then just click on the grid to deselect, and basically we have this, got this design. Now we're going to select from the other side without part selection, just select this entire polygon and go to extrusion and extrude it. Now the purpose here, we're going to extrude it because we're going to add some basic different design. It's very simple to kind of basic box modeling techniques we've shown before, where we add the value to extrude and then we're going to add some other transformations to it. So we can add over here a just type in the Y to 6, so we're going to move it up a little bit, 6 up, and this, by the way, here when you use these values, this is values how much you can move. The same when you go in a move tool, you have an option move by, so this is kind of a move by. You want to move up Y to 6. It's not the Y existing Y position, how high this is, it's just move it up by 6. And now we do similarly to scale. We're going to scale it down to -12 and -12 on 2 axes, and then we click apply. So as you can see, what we did over here is we made it smaller in 2 directions, and we also moved it. So it's basically the way you moved it. What happened here is that it's still flat on top. Otherwise, if you scaled it, this would have been shorter on top and bottom. So we moved it up so it stays flat on top. And now we're going to add a different value over here, so, simple extrusion and finalize. So we ended up another extrusion, this section over here. And now we're going to delete the inner faces because we're going to mirror them. And if you mirror them, you want them to be basically no inner faces. You don't have to remove it later. You can just remove it now, much better. And so we'll click finalize, and that's it. So we have this basic design over here, really low poly and really nice. And we're going to select them and Control M for merge, and it's merged together and moved 176 vertices, which are where they were connecting over here. And now we're going to activate to show this. Let's see, just to show it over here. And we're going to move this by Z to 0. So we're basically centering it. And if you remember before, we had this in the center, so it makes it very easy. You simply click 0 and we activate this one, deselect this, select this. And we're going to move this now to Z to 53. And this is basically pre-calculated positions, I guess, where to position them. As you can see, we align it with this. This is actually aligning this one over here. And now we're going to, as I said before, we're going to clean this up. So we're going now to adjust them to be correct. So we're going to use the bend tool, but we need a different plane, right, left and right. So it allows us to do it like this. So it makes Z to -70. -70. And as you can see, it basically bended. This should be rounded around the cylinder itself. Okay, cylindrical shape. And now we're going to mirror it on the other side, which I said before also, we need to have a copy on the other side. So we're just going to make a copy and offset that to 42. So we have it here, but we want to do it on the back side. Okay, so we do over here and finalize it. So we have it now on this side and on this side. And now we need to select both of them and plus this one. So now you can see over here, and this is where I keep on saying, I've said it a lot of times, and you can see the difference now, how the difference between polygons. So we are almost done, but you can see over here we have only about 4,000 polygons, actually 4,920, so close to 5,000 polygons. Now we're going to use Stitch and Scoop Union to combine all sections and take a look how much this will increase in polygons. So if we finalize it, we are up to 12,000 polygons. All we did is combine them, and you can see over here, this is basically just stitched together. Now it's still relatively really low. I've seen similar designs having like close to 500,000 polygons, so 4,000, 12,000 still really low. But before combining them, this is done, and the reason we were able to make it so low because the entire structure was done kind of like sculpted out from a single piece. These techniques that we have used, if you kept on using stitch and scoop and just stitching stuff together, you would have ended up having a very complex and very detailed mesh, very high poly. Okay, so now what we're left over here is mainly just styling. The entire thing is done. We just left with styling. So we're going to go to the material section over here, and we're going to add here a texture, and we're going to use a custom texture, which is the same idea we did before reference image. It gives me a place to load from this, which in reality this you would have loaded from your computer, and then once it's loaded you click on it to select it, and this is basically already applied. The thing is, this doesn't look nice, so this texture looks completely different than here, and this is where you have the UV mapping that we're going to do. I see the tutorial is quite long, so I'm not gonna go in too much detail, but basically the idea is the UV is positioning it how the image is positioned on top of the object, and we're going to have a different video explaining all of this, but for now let's just go over the main detail. You can already see this is you can already see the kind of the texture looks like, how it looks like using the unwrapping approach, but the thing here is that the image is very small relative to the object, so it's being stretched. It looks like pixelated over here, you can see. So what we're going to do over here is we're going to size this. It's actually hard to see. I'm just going to click next to do it. This actually SelfCAD is changing that to have an option to hide the image. You should better able to see the gizmos over here. For now I'm just going to click next, and what it's doing over here, you can see over here, it asks me actually here to snap this. Okay, so actually I would if the first click was clicking on texture. Okay, now I did see it. It was my mistake. I didn't realize that. I thought all I have to do it. Okay, but nevertheless, what we did over here is we made the unwrapped profile much smaller, kind of like a quarter of it or less. What's happening now here is, I mean the image we made smaller, I'm sorry, the image, the texture we made smaller, and this is much bigger now. So what happened here is we need to fill the entire thing. This is basically being duplicated, and this is considered a seamless texture, so we don't really see the seams, how they duplicate. So what ended up being that it's no longer pixelated, because it's kind of, think about it as a way that have the same images repeated a few times, so a much smaller space takes up the image itself. It's still not very nice. If you want to make it much more details, you could have scaled this down even much smaller, so it would have been more details, but for now this is good. So we have the basic thing over here, and now we have a problem here is that it's not very smooth. It's low poly, which is very good, 12,000 faces, but in some places over here, for example, we want this to be more smooth. So, but we don't want to smooth out the entire mesh. So what we're going to do over here, we're going to go to cube selection and simply move from the bottom. We're going to move it up to 15, and over here we're going to move it to 90. So we're basically just selecting this section over here, and we finalize. So we have this selected, this section, and now we're going to go to material selection and click smooth shading. So as you can see, it removed all of these edges, all these lines. It's hard to see actually, and then we're done tutorial. So I want to show you here something. This is actually hard to see while you have the texture on, the smoothness. So I'm going to show it here actually. When you go to materials, once you've added any setting different, could be simple color, or in this case just a smooth shader, it will end up having multiple material. So I'm going to switch this material. You see it flashes kind of to show you which one is selected. Similarly, if you go to the zero material, it flashes this one. So I'm going to go to this one, and I'm actually going to remove the texture for a minute. So if I remove the texture and I said none, no texture, and I go over here, reset material. Okay, now if I go back to the material section over here, you can see we see all of these edges over here, and if I go to smooth shader, this basically hides it. This is basically what we have done. We use smooth shader to hide this, and you can see the same with the texture, but it's much harder to see with the texture. But the main thing here is we didn't want to smooth out everything, so I canceled it and left it like this, and that's it. I wanted to show how to render this, but this video is already too long, so I guess I'll make a separate video to show how to render this. But overall, this is a wonderful design, and I'm sure you'll learn something new. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions, or if you want me to show anything else. Thanks for watching. Bye.